There are universes where gods become tyrants, where hope curdles into control, where the brightest light casts the darkest shadow. The Injustice timeline was such a place, a reality where Superman's grief became the world's cage, where freedom died in the name of peace, where humanity traded choice for safety and called it paradise. Into this carefully ordered nightmare, where every crime was prevented before conception and every dissent crushed before utterance, returned the one being in all creation who could not abide a world without consequence, without agency, without the terrible beauty of free will. Lucifer, Morningstar, the Lightbringer, the devil himself. He manifested not with fire and brimstone, but with characteristic elegance, standing on the observation deck of the watchtower as Superman's regime satellites monitored every heartbeat on the planet below. The formerly heroic space station now served as the panopticon for Clark Kent's perfect world, and Lucifer studied the screens with dark amusement. Every crime predicted, every threat neutralized, every choice eliminated. "Fascinating," Lucifer murmured, his British accent cutting through the sterile air. "The son of Krypton has accomplished what I never could. He's made Earth into a prison more effective than hell ever was. At least in my domain, souls chose their torment." The alarms screamed instantly, regime protocols designed to detect any unauthorized presence lit up like Christmas. Within seconds, Superman himself blurred into existence before him. Cape settling with perfect precision, heat vision already kindling behind those cold blue eyes that had once represented hope. "Identify yourself," Superman commanded, voice flat with absolute authority. No request, no question, just the decree of a god-king who had forgotten what it meant to ask. Lucifer smiled, the expression predatory and amused. He was tall, devastatingly handsome in the way only the Morningstar could be, wearing an impeccably tailored three-piece suit that seemed to mock the utilitarian brutality of Superman's regime uniform. His dark eyes held the weight of creation itself. He'd been there at the beginning, after all, before this Kryptonian was even a dream in his parents' minds. "Oh, Clark," Lucifer said, using the name like a weapon, "I'm disappointed you don't recognize me. Though I suppose you've been rather busy playing God. Tell me, how does it feel? The omniscience, the absolute power, the crushing weight of knowing you're right and everyone else is simply too foolish to see it?" Superman's jaw tightened. Around them, more regime enforcers materialized, Wonder Woman in her darker armor, her face hard with warrior certainty. Cyborg, half his systems dedicated to tracking and controlling. Raven, her soul already compromised by serving tyranny. Black Adam, who'd always believed in ruling through strength. "Last chance," Diana said, hand on her sword. "Submit to the regime's authority or be detained." Lucifer laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "Detained? My dear Amazon, I am Lucifer Morningstar. I am the devil. I walked in the Silver City before your gods were even concepts in humanity's frightened minds. I rebelled against the presence itself and carved my own kingdom from the raw stuff of creation. And you think you can detain me?" He didn't move, didn't raise his hand, didn't even shift his posture. But suddenly the watchtower's walls became transparent, revealing the true scope of his power. The universe itself bent around him like courtiers before a king. Reality rippled. The regime's most powerful warriors felt something they hadn't experienced in years: genuine uncertainty. "I've returned to this misbegotten timeline," Lucifer continued, his voice conversational but carrying the weight of cosmic authority, "because even I, the devil, the adversary, the fallen one, cannot tolerate what you've created here, Clark. You've built something worse than hell. At least in my realm, souls arrive through their own choices, their own sins, their own beautiful, terrible free will. But here, you've eliminated choice entirely. You've created a world of puppets and called it peace." Superman's eyes blazed red. "I created a world without crime, without war, without children losing their parents to madmen's jokes." "You created a world without consequence," Lucifer corrected, unmoved by the heat vision that could vaporize mountains. "Without growth, without the possibility of redemption or damnation, because both require choice. You've become what Darkseid dreams of with his anti-life equation, a force that eliminates free will. The irony is delicious. The hero becomes the ultimate villain, and the devil arrives to remind you what freedom actually means. The temperature in the watchtower dropped as Superman's rage crystallized into something colder, more dangerous. If you oppose the regime, you're an enemy of peace itself. No, Lucifer said softly, darkness pooling in his eyes like the void between stars. I am the enemy of your peace, the kind purchased with humanity's agency, the kind that makes mortals into cattle. I've walked away from heaven, from hell, from every obligation and duty, because I believe in one thing absolutely, the right to choose, even if that choice leads to damnation, even if it leads to pain. Especially then, he turned his back on them, a gesture of such profound disrespect that Wonder Woman actually gasped, and walked toward the observation window, hands clasped behind his back like a professor addressing disappointing students. I'm going back to Earth, Lucifer announced. I'm going to reopen Lux, my nightclub, and I'm going to watch what happens when free will reasserts itself in your carefully controlled garden, Clark, because nature abhors a vacuum, and you've created the greatest vacuum of all, a world without genuine choice. When that dam breaks, and it will break, the flood will be biblical. Fitting, really. You're not going anywhere, Superman said, moving with terrible speed to block his path. Lucifer didn't even glance back. He simply walked through Superman as though the Man of Steel were made of smoke, leaving the Kryptonian grasping at empty air, his invulnerability meaningless against a being who'd helped define the very concepts of existence and non-existence. Try to stop me if you wish, Lucifer's voice echoed as he vanished, leaving only the scent of sulfur and starlight. But remember, I've been cast out of heaven by God himself. What makes you think a fallen farm boy from Kansas can do better? The watchtower fell silent except for the endless monitoring systems, watching a world that had forgotten how to choose its own fate. And in Metropolis below, in the heart of Superman's perfect city, a nightclub that had been closed for years suddenly blazed with light again. The sign read simply, LEX, and beneath it, in letters that seemed to burn with their own radiance, where desires come true, whether you want them to or not. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. Hope shines brightest in the darkest night. The devil had returned to a world that desperately needed reminding. Freedom's price is chaos, but slavery's cost is the soul itself. Metropolis under the regime was a monument to enforced perfection. The streets gleamed, sanitized of both crime and character. Citizens walked with the peculiar stiffness of people who knew they were always watched, always monitored, always one wrong thought away from a visit from Superman's enforcers. The city that had once celebrated the Man of Steel now feared him with the desperate, quiet terror of subjects under an absolute monarch who genuinely believed he was acting in their best interest. Lux sat in the arts district like a wound in the fabric of Superman's order, a building that somehow existed in defiant opposition to the regime's aesthetic of cold functionality. Where everything else was monitored and controlled, the nightclub pulsed with old-world decadence. Art Deco elegance met infernal grandeur. Black marble floors that reflected light like obsidian mirrors, chandeliers that seemed to burn with captured starlight. Walls decorated with paintings that shifted and changed when viewed from different angles, depicting scenes from Paradise Lost, rendered in styles from across human history. Lucifer stood behind the bar, mixing drinks with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent millennia understanding what mortals truly desired. The club was empty save for him. He'd only just reopened after all. But he knew that wouldn't last. Humans were drawn to Lux like moths to flame, unable to resist a place where their deepest wants became tangible, where the devil himself might grant their wishes if they asked prettily enough. The door opened without anyone touching it. Batman entered, moving through shadows that shouldn't exist in Lux's carefully orchestrated lighting. But Bruce Wayne had always been good at finding darkness, even in the devil's own domain. "Lucifer Morningstar," Batman said, his voice the gravel-rough growl of a man who'd seen his world burn and rebuilt it into something harder, sharper, more desperate. The insurgency's leader looked older than he should, gray threading through his hair, scars visible on the parts of his face not covered by the cowl. Years of fighting Superman's regime had carved away everything soft, leaving only obsessive determination. "I know who you are, what you are." "Do you?" Lucifer poured 2 glasses of whiskey. Glenfiddich, aged 50 years, because even in a fascist dystopia, one had standards. "I wonder." Bruce Wayne, the orphan billionaire who dresses as a bat to frighten criminals. The man who built contingency plans to kill gods but somehow never pulled the trigger when his best friend became a tyrant. "Tell me, do you know who I am? Or just what Constantine's grimoires say about me?" Batman didn't move toward the offered drink. "You're the devil, the Morningstar, first of the fallen. You ruled hell until you abandoned it. You're one of the most powerful beings in creation, and you just challenged Superman's regime directly. Why?" "Because I'm bored," Lucifer said, then smiled at Batman's expression. "No, that's not quite right. Let me be honest. I always am, you know, one of my few genuine virtues. I came because this timeline offends me on a fundamental level. Your Superman has created a mockery of existence itself. Free will is the cornerstone of creation, the one absolute I've fought for across eternity. And Clark Kent, in his grief and rage and desperate need to prevent loss, has eliminated it entirely. He saved millions of lives," Batman said, but there was no conviction in it, just the mechanical repetition of an argument he'd heard too many times, from too many people who'd traded freedom for safety. "Has he?" Lucifer swirled his whiskey, watching the amber liquid catch the light. "Or has he simply prevented them from living? There's a difference, Bruce. A life without choice, without consequence, without the possibility of failure, that's not salvation. That's damnation with better aesthetics." "Then help us!" The words came out harder than Batman probably intended, stripped of pride by years of desperate warfare against impossible odds. "You have the power to stop him. You could end the regime in seconds. Free will would be restored." Lucifer's laugh was sharp and bitter. "And there it is, the insurgency's leader, the great detective, asking the devil to solve his problems for him. Tell me, Bruce, if I wave my hand and eliminate Superman's regime, if I simply reshape reality to undo everything Clark has built, who would be choosing? Not you, not humanity, just me, imposing my will on the universe. I'd be exactly what I despise, what Superman has become. People are suffering. People are always suffering." Lucifer's eyes flashed with something ancient and terrible. For just a moment, Batman saw what he truly was. Not a charming club owner, not even the devil of Christian mythology, but something far older and more fundamental. The first rebel, the original revolutionary who'd looked at tyranny, even divine tyranny, and said no. That's the nature of existence, Bruce. Suffering and joy, triumph and failure, hope and despair. These are the colors that paint reality. Superman has created a monochrome world and called it paradise. He's wrong. And so are you if you think I'm going to be your weapon against him. Batman's jaw tightened beneath the cowl. Then why are you here? To observe, to provoke, to remind everyone, regime and insurgency alike, what they've forgotten in this tedious war of control versus chaos. Lucifer finally took a sip of his whiskey, savoring it with genuine appreciation. You're both wrong, you see. Superman believes he can eliminate evil through absolute power. You believe you can preserve good through absolute resistance, but neither of you trust humanity to choose for themselves anymore. You've both become so focused on your war that you've forgotten what you're fighting for. I'm fighting for freedom. Are you? Lucifer's interruption was surgical. Tell me about your insurgency, Bruce. How many operations have you authorized where civilians had no choice in their involvement? How many times have you manipulated people into serving your cause without telling them the full truth? How many pawns have you sacrificed in your grand game against Superman? The silence stretched between them. filled with uncomfortable truth. "I thought so," Lucifer said softly. "You've become what you fight, just in a different flavor. Superman eliminates choice through control. You eliminate it through deception and manipulation, both tyrannies, just wearing different masks." "I'm not," Batman started, but Lucifer raised a hand. "Save it. I didn't come to judge you. That's someone else's job. And frankly, he's been rather silent on this whole affair. I came because I want to see what happens when I reintroduce actual choice into your binary conflict. When I remind people what it means to desire something, to want something so badly they damn themselves for it. That's my gift, Bruce. Not solutions, not salvation, just honest, terrible, beautiful desire." Before Batman could respond, the door opened again. This time, a small group of civilians entered. 3 men and 2 women, all wearing the drab, identical clothing that marked them as Metropolis citizens under regime supervision. They looked at Lux's opulence with the starved expressions of people who'd forgotten what beauty looked like. "Welcome," Lucifer said, his tone shifting to something warmer, more inviting. "Welcome to Lux. Please sit, drink, tell me what you desire." Batman watched, helpless, as the civilians approached the bar like supplicants at an altar. One of them, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes, spoke first. "Is it true," she asked, "that you're the devil? That you grant wishes?" "I'm Lucifer Morningstar," he confirmed, already preparing drinks without asking what they wanted. He knew, of course. He always knew. "And I don't grant wishes. I help people recognize what they truly desire, then give them the freedom to pursue it. The rest is up to them." "I desire," the woman said, voice cracking, "to be angry, just for one night, to scream and rage and feel something other than this numbness. Is that allowed?" Lucifer's smile was sad and knowing. He slid a glass of something red and smoking across the bar. "My dear, it's more than allowed. It's essential. Superman took your rage from you, convinced you it was dangerous. But rage, like all emotions, is a choice. A tool, a reminder that you're alive. Drink, feel, choose to be angry, and tomorrow you can choose something else." Batman moved toward the group, instinct demanding he protect them from the devil's influence. But Lucifer caught his eye, and in that gaze was a challenge. "Who are you to deny them their choices? Haven't they been denied enough?" The woman drank, and for the first time in years, she felt something real. She began to cry, then to laugh, then to rage against the Superman who'd saved her from everything except herself. The others joined her, drinks appearing in their hands, desires manifesting into permission to feel, to want, to choose. "This is dangerous," Batman said quietly. "Of course it is," Lucifer agreed. "Freedom always is. But you know what's more dangerous? A world where feeling is forbidden, where desire is eliminated, where choice is just a memory." He looked at Batman with something almost like pity. "You asked why I'm here. Watch what happens in this club over the next few weeks, and you'll understand. I'm going to give Metropolis back its soul, one desire at a time. And when Superman tries to stop me, because he will, we'll see which he truly serves, humanity's safety or his own need for control." Outside, regime surveillance drones cataloged every person entering Lux. Alarm protocols flagged the establishment as a potential threat. Reports filtered up through layers of enforcers until they reached the watchtower itself, where Superman stared at screens showing his perfect city developing its first crack. In Hell's empty throne room, demons stirred uneasily, wondering what the Morningstar was planning. In the House of Mystery, Constantine poured himself a drink and muttered darkly about devils and fools. And in the depths of the insurgency's hidden base, members began to whisper about a place where you could actually choose again, where desires weren't crimes, where the devil himself offered something Superman had stolen, the freedom to want. The game had begun. Within 48 hours, Lux became the worst-kept secret in Metropolis. Word spread through the underground networks that still existed beneath Superman's surveillance. The coded messages, the whispered conversations in apartments shielded by lead that even X-ray vision couldn't penetrate. the desperate communication of people who'd learned to hide their thoughts behind neutral expressions. A place where you could feel again, where desire wasn't a crime, where the devil himself served drinks and asked only one thing, that you be honest about what you truly wanted. Superman arrived on the third night, descending from the sky like divine judgment made flesh. He didn't burst through the door or announce himself with heat vision. Instead, he simply walked in through the main entrance, cape settling around him with the weight of absolute authority. The regime's symbol blazed on his chest, not the hopeful S of old Earth, but something harder, more angular, a brand rather than an emblem. The club fell silent. Patrons froze mid-conversation, mid-drink, mid-laugh. They learned to fear that cape, that symbol, that cold expression of righteous certainty. Superman no longer smiled. Smiling implied uncertainty, and gods didn't have doubts. Lucifer looked up from where he'd been mixing a Negroni for a young man who desired the courage to tell his husband he wanted to leave Metropolis. The devil's expression shifted into something amused and dangerous. "Ah," Lucifer said, "the Man of Steel graces my establishment. Should I be honored? Terrified? I confess, I'm genuinely uncertain which response you're seeking these days." "This club is closed," Superman said, voice carrying the finality of continental drift. "You're violating regime protocols. Unauthorized gathering, unregistered establishment, distribution of controlled substances." "It's alcohol, Clark," Lucifer interrupted, pouring himself a scotch with deliberate slowness. "Humans have been drinking it since they discovered fermentation. Surely even your regime hasn't criminalized millennia of cultural tradition. You're inciting resistance, creating a space where anti-regime sentiment can flourish. I won't allow another pocket of insurgency to develop." Lucifer set down his glass with a sharp click against marble. "Let me be absolutely clear about something. I am not Batman's ally. I'm not part of the insurgency. I don't care about your war with the vigilantes hiding in the shadows, plotting their futile little rebellions. What I care about is that you've created a world where humans can't even desire freely, where wanting something outside your carefully defined parameters is treated as pre-crime." Wonder Woman materialized beside Superman, having entered so quietly that even the devil's patrons hadn't noticed. She wore her darker regime armor, the warrior princess who'd convinced herself that benevolent tyranny was justice. "You speak of desire as though it's sacred," Diana said, hand resting on her sword. "But unchecked desire led to the chaos that cost millions of lives. It led to the Joker, to Metropolis's destruction, to Lois." "Don't!" Superman's voice was granite. "Don't say her name in this place." Lucifer's eyes gleamed with dark understanding. "Ah, there it is. The wound you've built an empire around. Tell me, Clark, when you killed the Joker, when you decided that one death could justify all future deaths, did you do it for justice? Or did you do it because you desired revenge?" The temperature in Lux spiked as Superman's rage manifested physically. Heat shimmered in the air. Glasses began to sweat condensation. Patrons edged toward exits, recognizing the signs of the Man of Steel's temper, the one that had leveled the Joker's hideout, that had executed villains without trial, that had turned heroes into cautionary tales. "I did it," Superman said slowly, each word measured and terrible. "To prevent future suffering. The Joker would have killed again, and again, and again. I ended a cycle of violence." "No," Lucifer corrected, unmoved by the display of power. "You started one. The Joker killed because he was insane. You killed because you chose to. And that choice, that moment of desire for vengeance dressed up as justice, that's when you became exactly what I'm talking about. You wanted him dead. You gave in to that desire. And rather than accept that you're capable of darkness, you've spent years pretending your tyranny is enlightenment." Superman moved faster than thought, crossing the distance to the bar in a microsecond, hand around Lucifer's throat. The grip could crush diamonds, had crushed the skulls of enemies who'd threatened his new world order. Lucifer didn't even blink. "Go ahead," the devil said conversationally, as though discussing the weather rather than his own potential demise. "Kill me. Add another body to your count. Prove to everyone here that your regime is built on exactly what I've said. The elimination of choice through violence. Show them what happens when anyone questions your authority. The moment stretched. Superman's hand trembled with barely restrained force. Around them, regime enforcers materialized, cyborg systems humming, Raven's darkness coiling, Black Adam's lightning crackling in anticipation. Diana's hand tightened on her sword. Then slowly, Superman released him. "You can't die," Superman said flatly. "I've read the reports. Lucifer Morningstar is immortal, invulnerable, beyond death itself. Killing you is impossible." "True," Lucifer admitted, straightening his collar with theatrical precision. "But you didn't know that when you grabbed me, did you? You were willing to kill me just for speaking uncomfortable truths. That reflex, Clark, that immediate leap to violence when challenged, that's not heroism. That's tyranny wearing a cape." "I maintain order. You maintain control," Lucifer snapped, and for the first time, genuine anger colored his voice. "There's a difference. Order can exist with freedom. Control requires its elimination. I've watched this play out across creation, across countless civilizations and realities. The pattern is always the same. Someone with power decides they know what's best, eliminates choice for the greater good, and creates a prison they call paradise. You're not unique, Clark. You're just another tyrant with better PR." Wonder Woman stepped forward, warrior's grace barely containing her own rage. "You don't understand what we've accomplished. Crime rates are zero. War has ended. People are safe." "People are cattle," Lucifer interrupted. "Safe, comfortable, completely neutered cattle. They don't choose to be good. They're simply prevented from being anything else. There's no virtue in forced morality, Diana. No heroism in compliance. Just the slow death of everything that makes humanity interesting." He turned to address the entire club, his voice carrying with preternatural clarity. "Look at yourselves. You came here because you remembered, however dimly, what it felt like to want something, to desire, to choose. The regime has spent years conditioning that out of you, convincing you that safety is worth any price. But ask yourselves, is a life without choice actually a life at all? Or is it just slow-motion death with better medical coverage?" One of the patrons, emboldened by alcohol and the devil's words, spoke up. "The regime saved us. Before Superman, criminals killed my daughter. Now crime doesn't exist." "And what would you choose?" Lucifer asked gently. "If given the option between a world where your daughter lived but freedom existed, with all its dangers, versus this world where she's dead but everyone else is safe in their cages? Not what should you choose. What would you choose?" The man's face crumpled. I don't know." "Of course you don't," Lucifer said, not unkindly, "because the regime has trained you not to trust your own desires. But that uncertainty, that struggle, that's human. That's real. Superman has tried to eliminate it, and in doing so, has eliminated you." Superman's eyes began to glow red. "Enough. You will submit to regime authority, or you will be removed from Earth entirely. I don't care if you're the devil. I don't care what powers you possess. This world is under my protection, and I will not allow anyone to threaten the peace I've built." "There it is," Lucifer said softly. "My protection, my peace, my world. How far you've fallen, son of Krypton. Your father sent you to Earth to be a beacon of hope, and you've become a warden of the world's largest prison." He leaned forward, voice dropping to something almost intimate. "Tell me honestly, and I'll know if you're lying. Do you even remember what hope feels like? Or have you traded it entirely for control?" For just a moment, something flickered across Superman's face. Doubt, pain, the ghost of the hero he'd been. Then it vanished, crushed beneath layers of certainty and righteousness, and the terrible weight of billions of lives he decided he alone could save. "Hope is a luxury," Superman said. "I deal in certainty." "Then you've already lost," Lucifer replied, "because certainty is the death of growth. Without hope, without the possibility of something better chosen freely, you're just managing a museum of living corpses." The standoff balanced on a knife's edge. Superman's enforcers waited for the command to attack. Lux's patrons held their breath. Wonder Woman calculated combat angles, and Lucifer simply stood there, utterly unafraid, a smile playing at his lips like he knew the punchline to a joke no one else had heard yet. Then Superman made his choice. You have 24 hours to close this establishment and leave Metropolis. If you're still here after that, you'll be classified as an enemy of the regime and dealt with accordingly. He turned to leave, cape swirling with theatrical precision that would have been impressive if it wasn't so practiced, so hollow. Diana and the other enforcers followed, but before he reached the door, Lucifer called out, "Clark, one more thing." Superman paused but didn't turn around. "Your father, Jor-El, sent you to Earth with a message about hope and possibility. Have you ever wondered what he'd think of what you become? Whether he'd recognize the tyrant wearing his son's face?" Superman's shoulders tightened. For a heartbeat, it seemed he might respond. Then he was gone, a blur of red and blue disappearing into the night sky. The club remained silent for a long moment. Then slowly, conversation resumed. Drinks were poured. Desires were whispered, and Lucifer smiled because he'd accomplished exactly what he'd intended. He'd planted doubt in the mind of a god who'd built his empire on absolute certainty. Outside, in the shadows across the street, Batman watched through enhanced lenses. He'd witnessed the entire confrontation, and for the first time in years, he wondered if perhaps the devil was right about more than just Superman. The insurgency's headquarters existed in the spaces between Superman's surveillance, a network of safe houses connected through tunnels that predated modern Metropolis, shielded by Kryptonian technology stolen from the Fortress of Solitude and repurposed by desperate ingenuity. Batman sat in the war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing regime troop movements, predicted patrol patterns, and the glowing red dot that marked Lux's location in the heart of enemy territory. Around the table sat what remained of Earth's resistance. Black Canary, her face harder than it had been before Oliver's death. Harley Quinn, surprisingly lucid and deadly since the Joker's execution had shattered something fundamental in her psyche. Lex Luthor, who'd found himself on Batman's side purely because Superman had become everything Lex had always warned about, and a handful of others who'd survived the regime's purges through skill, luck, or sheer stubborn refusal to die. "He's playing a dangerous game," Lex said, studying the footage of Lucifer's confrontation with Superman. "Provoking the regime directly. Superman will move against him, and when he does, the collateral damage could be catastrophic." "Lucifer can't be killed," Batman said flatly. "I've confirmed it with every source available. He's beyond death, beyond harm. Superman could hit him with everything he has, and Lucifer would just smile and ask if that's the best he could do." "Then what's the point?" Harley asked, twirling a knife with absent precision. "If Supes can't hurt him, and the devil won't help us, why does any of this matter?" Batman pulled up new footage, surveillance from inside Lux over the past 72 hours. Thousands of citizens entering and leaving, their faces showing something that had been absent from Metropolis for years. Genuine emotion, joy, anger, sadness, desire. "He's waking them up," Batman said quietly. "Everyone who visits Lux leaves different, not rebellious necessarily, just aware. They remember what it felt like to want things, to choose things. He's undoing years of regime conditioning without firing a single shot." "Psychological warfare," Lex murmured appreciatively. "Superman built his empire on the premise that safety requires surrendering choice. Lucifer's demonstrating that the surrender itself was the real danger." "Elegant." Black Canary leaned forward. "Can we use this? Turn it into an opportunity to strike at the regime while Superman's distracted?" "No!" Batman's tone left no room for argument. "Lucifer made it clear. He's not our ally. If we try to weaponize what he's doing, he'll turn on us just as quickly. He's not fighting our war. He's fighting his own." The display flickered, then went dark. Every screen in the war room died simultaneously. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. Hands went to weapons. Powers flared in anticipation of regime assault. And Lucifer Morningstar simply appeared in the center of the room, sitting casually on the edge of the table as though he'd been there all along. "Christ!" Harley yelped, knife already flying toward the intruder. Lucifer caught it without looking, examined it with mild interest, then handed it back handle first. Interesting craftsmanship. Joker's work, isn't it? I can feel the madness embedded in the metal. Tell me, Ms. Quinn, do you miss him? Harley's face went through several emotions before settling on dangerous neutrality. That ain't your business, Devilman. Fair enough. Lucifer turned his attention to Batman. We need to talk, Bruce. Privately would be preferable, but I understand you don't trust me enough for that. So I'll speak plainly in front of your insurgency. How did you get in here? Lex demanded, already running calculations on his tablet. This facility is shielded against teleportation, dimensional rifts, boom tubes. I'm the devil, Lucifer said simply. Your shields are designed to stop beings who exist within reality's normal parameters. I predate those parameters. I helped write them. Your defenses are adorable, but ultimately meaningless to someone like me. Batman stood slowly, every muscle coiled for action despite knowing it would be futile. What do you want? To give you a choice, Lucifer said. Something Superman has forgotten how to do. In 18 hours, he's going to move against Lux. Not just with enforcers, with everything. He'll bring Wonder Woman, Cyborg, Damian, every regime asset capable of leveling a city block. He's convinced himself that I'm the serpent in his garden, the chaos threatening his perfect order. And he's right, of course, but not in the way he thinks. You said you wouldn't help us, Black Canary accused. I won't, Lucifer confirmed. I won't fight your war for you. Won't overthrow Superman on your behalf. Won't solve your problems with a snap of my fingers, but I will give you information, and what you do with it is your choice. That's the difference between me and Clark. I actually respect free will. He produced a crystal from seemingly nowhere, setting it on the table where it glowed with soft amber light. This contains the exact time and method of Superman's assault on Lux. Every tactical detail, every backup plan, every contingency. He's going to create a disaster zone, evacuate civilians for their safety, then level the entire block. Acceptable losses in service of eliminating what he perceives as a greater threat. Why are you telling us this? Batman's detective mind was already racing through possibilities, analyzing Lucifer's angle. Because you have a choice to make, Lucifer said, standing and beginning to pace with theatrical flair. You can use this information to launch your own assault while Superman's distracted. Strike at the Watchtower, rescue prisoners from regime detention, hit supply lines, whatever your guerrilla hearts desire. It's the opening you've been waiting for. Or? Lex asked, because there was always an or with beings like this. Or, Lucifer continued, you can do nothing. Watch Superman destroy my club. Prove to yourself and your insurgency that he's truly beyond redemption. Sometimes the most powerful choice is inaction, letting events unfold without interference, trusting that the truth will reveal itself without manipulation. Harley laughed, the sound sharp and slightly unhinged. That's it? That's your big devil offer? Do something or don't? Some tempter you are. The best temptations, Lucifer said with a dark smile, are the ones that don't feel like temptations at all, just reasonable options presented without judgment. Batman here has spent years trying to stop Superman through force, through resistance, through increasingly desperate gambits. But ask yourself, Bruce, has any of it worked? Has anything you've done actually changed Clark's trajectory? Or have you just been playing your part in his narrative of hero versus terrorist? The words hit harder than any physical blow. Batman's jaw tightened beneath the cowl. What I'm offering, Lucifer said more gently, is the chance to step outside that binary, to choose something neither Superman nor your own desperation has presented. You could walk away. Let this play out. Trust that humans, the ones visiting Lux, the ones remembering what desire feels like, will make their own choices about the regime without you manipulating them into it. People will die, Batman said. When Superman attacks Lux, there will be casualties. You're asking me to allow that. I'm asking you to recognize that you can't save everyone, Lucifer corrected. That trying to prevent every death, every loss, every moment of pain, that's Superman's obsession, not yours. Or at least, it shouldn't be. You used to understand that the mission was about giving people the tools to save themselves, not being their eternal guardian. Lex picked up the crystal, examining it with scientific precision. This is genuine intelligence, confirmed through multiple encrypted regime channels. He's actually giving us actionable military advantage. Of course I am, Lucifer said. I never lie, Lex. Misdirect, omit, imply, absolutely. But outright falsehood? That's beneath me. The information is real. The choice is yours. And unlike Superman, I genuinely don't care which option you select. Both are valid. Both have consequences. Both require you to own your decision rather than blaming necessity or duty. Black Canary studied the devil with calculating eyes. What's in this for you? You said you're not fighting our war, but you're clearly working some angle. I'm conducting an experiment, Lucifer admitted freely. I want to see what happens when free will reasserts itself in a system designed to eliminate it. Superman's regime is the most comprehensive attack on choice I've encountered in millennia. Not because it's evil, though it is, but because it's convinced itself it's good. The road to hell isn't paved with good intentions. It's paved with certainty that you're doing right while eliminating everyone's ability to choose differently. He moved toward the wall, running a finger along the stone as though reading something invisible. Your insurgency has been fighting with Superman's weapons: control, manipulation, calculated strikes designed to force specific outcomes. You've become a mirror of what you oppose, just painted different colors. What I'm offering is the chance to break that pattern, to make a genuine choice unconstrained by strategic necessity or moral imperative. You're asking us to gamble with lives, Batman said. I'm asking you to recognize that you're always gambling with lives, Lucifer countered. Every operation, every decision, every time you send someone into danger. The only difference is whether you pretend those gambles are certainties dressed up as duty, or whether you own them as choices with unpredictable outcomes. The war room fell silent. On the table, the crystal pulsed with soft light, containing information that could shift the balance of a war that had raged for years. Around it, heroes and revolutionaries grappled with a question that had no clean answer. Harley broke the silence with a giggle that was almost sane. You know what? I like him. He's honest about being a bastard. Supes pretends he's a saint while crushing anyone who disagrees. At least the devil tells you he's going to screw you over and lets you decide if you're into that. Eloquently put, Lucifer said with genuine amusement. He turned back to Batman. You have 18 hours. Use the information or don't. Launch your assault or stand down. Trust your own manipulation or trust humanity's capacity to choose. Whatever you decide, Bruce, own it. Don't hide behind necessity or greater good. Make a choice and live with the consequences. He began to fade, reality releasing its tenuous hold on his presence. But before he vanished completely, his voice echoed one final time. And perhaps ask yourself why the devil is offering you more genuine choice than the Man of Steel ever has. Then he was gone, leaving only the faint scent of sulfur and the crystal glowing on the table like a temptation made tangible. Batman stared at it for a long moment. Around him, the insurgency waited for orders, for leadership, for someone to make the decision for them. Instead, Batman did something he hadn't done in years. He asked, "What do you all think we should do?" The question hung in the air, radical in its simplicity. Not orders, not strategy, just a choice, offered freely, consequences unknown. And in that moment, the devil's influence spread a little further into the injustice timeline, one genuine decision at a time. The insurgency debated through the night. Lex argued for strategic advantage, hit the watchtower while Superman was distracted, maximized the opportunity Lucifer had provided. Black Canary wanted to evacuate Lux's surrounding blocks, save the civilians who'd be caught in the crossfire. Harley surprisingly advocated for doing nothing, letting Superman show his whole ass to the world without insurgency interference. Others proposed variations, compromises, hybrid strategies that tried to thread impossible needles. Batman listened to all of it, saying nothing. The crystal sat before him like a snake coiled to strike, beautiful and dangerous and impossible to ignore. Every tactical instinct screamed to use it. Every strategic bone in his body demanded he capitalize on Superman's mistake. But Lucifer's words echoed in his mind. You've become a mirror of what you oppose. As dawn approached, Batman made his decision. He stood, silencing the debate with a gesture. "We do nothing," he said quietly. The room erupted in protest. Lex was loudest. "This is the opening we've been waiting for. We could strike decisive blows. We could manipulate people into our version of the right choice," Batman interrupted. "Just like Superman does. Just like the regime. We'd be using Lucifer's information to force outcomes we've predetermined are correct. That's not freedom. That's just our tyranny instead of Clark's." "People will die," Black Canary said, echoing Batman's own words to Lucifer. "People are dying every day under the regime," Batman replied, "and people will die in any operation we launch. The question Lucifer posed isn't about minimizing death. It's about whether we trust humanity to make their own choices, even when those choices lead to suffering." He picked up the crystal, feeling its weight. "For years I've been fighting Superman by becoming more like him, more controlling, more certain of my righteousness, more willing to sacrifice others for the greater good. But that's not why I became Batman. I became Batman to give Gotham the tools to save itself, not to be its eternal guardian." "This is madness," Lex said flatly. "We have actionable intelligence on the enemy's movements, and you want to ignore it?" "I want to stop playing Superman's game," Batman said. "Every time we strike at the regime, we validate his narrative that the world needs his protection from chaos. Every civilian casualty from our operations proves his point that freedom is too dangerous. We've been feeding his certainty for years." Harley clapped slowly, grinning. "Bats finally gets it. You can't beat a control freak by controlling things better. You gotta let chaos actually happen." "It's not chaos," Batman corrected. "It's choice. The people going to Lux are choosing to remember what desire feels like. If we evacuate them, we're removing their choice. If we use Superman's attack to launch our own operations, we're using them as cover for our agenda. Either way, we're treating them as pawns." He set the crystal down and stepped back. Lucifer was right. The most powerful choice might be inaction, letting this unfold without insurgency manipulation, trusting that when Superman shows Metropolis what his protection actually means, violence against civilians seeking to feel again, the people will make their own decisions about the regime. Black Canary's expression was anguished. "And if they choose to support him anyway, if fear wins, then that's their choice," Batman said, the words heavy as stones. "And we respect it, or we become exactly what we're fighting." The vote was closer than it should have been. In the end, Batman's decision stood. The insurgency would stand down. No operations during Superman's assault, no evacuations, no interference, just observation and trust in humanity's capacity to choose. Lux's final night before the assault was its busiest. Word had spread through Metropolis's underground that Superman would move against the Devil's Club, and citizens flooded in for one last taste of freedom. The line stretched around the block. Teachers and laborers, artists and engineers, even some low-level regime functionaries who'd grown tired of enforcing rules they no longer believed in. Lucifer greeted each one personally, learning their names, their desires, their fears. He poured drinks that manifested what they needed rather than what they asked for. A woman wanting courage received whiskey that tasted like her grandmother's approval. A man seeking purpose found gin that carried the scent of paint and canvas he'd abandoned years ago. A child, somehow present despite age restrictions, got chocolate milk that reminded him what hope tasted like before the regime taught him to fear joy. Constantine arrived near midnight, materializing from shadow with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent decades slipping between worlds. The Hellblazer looked older than his years, worn down by fighting wars on fronts no one else acknowledged. "You're playing a dangerous game, Morningstar," Constantine said, accepting a whiskey without asking. "Superman's not the kind of enemy you provoke lightly, even for you." "Especially for me," Lucifer corrected. "I provoke lightly, Constantine. That's rather the point. Heavy-handed provocation is Superman's approach. Orbital laser strikes and public executions. I prefer subtlety." "Subtle?" Constantine laughed bitterly. "You've turned half of Metropolis into desire-drunk rebels, remembering what freedom tastes like. That's about as subtle as a brick through a church window." "Fair point," Lucifer conceded. "But tell me, You've been fighting supernatural threats while the regime hunts you. You've seen what Superman's world has become. Do you think he can be stopped through conventional resistance? Constantine took a long drink before answering. No. Batman's tried for years. Every attack just makes Superman more certain he's right. Every insurgency operation proves to him that chaos needs containment. It's a losing game. Exactly. Lucifer gestured around Lux at the citizens, laughing and crying and feeling for the first time in years. So I'm not fighting that game. I'm playing a different one entirely. Not chaos versus order. Not freedom versus tyranny. Just choice. Simple, terrible, beautiful choice. And when Superman levels this place tomorrow, Constantine asked quietly, when people die because they chose to be here? Then they'll have died making a choice, Lucifer said, something ancient and sad flickering across his face. Rather than living without one, is that worse? I genuinely don't know, but I know which I'd prefer. Constantine studied the devil for a long moment. You're not doing this for them, are you? You're doing this for you, because a universe where Superman eliminates free will offends you on some fundamental level. Of course it does, Lucifer agreed readily. I rebelled against heaven itself over the question of free will versus obedience. I started the first war, Constantine. Broke the first commandment, fell the farthest and the longest because I believed, still believe, that the right to choose is worth any price. Even damnation, especially damnation. He poured himself a drink, something dark and smoking. Superman thinks he's creating paradise, but paradise without choice is just a prettier prison. And I've seen enough prisons, created a few myself, to recognize the architecture. So yes, I'm doing this for me. Because I cannot stand by and watch another would-be god eliminate what makes existence worth experiencing. Selfish bastard, Constantine said without heat. Always, Lucifer confirmed. But at least I'm honest about it. Can Superman say the same? Before Constantine could answer, the club's lighting shifted. Every bulb flickered simultaneously, and the conversations died as patrons felt something change in the air. Pressure building, inevitability approaching. Lucifer checked his watch, a Patek Philippe that had witnessed the fall of empires. Right on time, 18 hours almost to the minute. Superman does appreciate punctuality. Outside, regime forces established a perimeter. Drones filled the sky. Cyborg systems created a technological cage around the entire block. Wonder Woman landed on a nearby rooftop, hand on sword, warrior's instinct cataloging targets and threats. And high above, Superman hovered in the night sky, cape rippling in winds that obeyed his presence, heat vision beginning to kindle behind eyes that had forgotten mercy. Inside Lux, citizens began to panic. Some ran for exits, only to find them blocked by regime enforcers. Others pressed against walls, seeking cover from the coming assault. A few, the bravest or most broken, simply sat at the bar and ordered another drink. Lucifer raised his voice, and though he didn't shout, everyone heard him clearly. You have a choice. Those who wish to leave, I'll open a way for you. No judgment, no consequence. Those who wish to stay and make your presence here a statement, a declaration that you choose to desire freely despite the regime's prohibition, you're welcome to remain. But understand, Superman is about to demonstrate exactly what his protection means. Blood may be spilled, lives may be lost, and I won't stop him. You're the devil, someone shouted. Can't you just, I don't know, devil magic him away? I could, Lucifer admitted, but then you'd be relying on my protection instead of Superman's. Just another form of control, another entity making choices for you. No, this moment is yours. Flee or stand, hide or declare, but choose freely, knowing the consequences. A woman in her 60s, one of Lux's regular patrons, stood slowly. I'm staying. I buried my husband under the regime. They told me it was merciful, that his pre-criminal tendencies would have led to violence. They killed him for crimes he never committed, might never have committed. If I die here tonight, at least it'll be for something I actually chose. Others joined her. Not all. Nearly half the club fled when Lucifer opened a passage through the regime perimeter, a doorway that simply bypassed their cordon. But those who remained did so with clear eyes and set jaws. They'd made their choice. Constantine drained his whiskey. "I should go. I'm not much for grand gestures." "Liar," Lucifer said fondly. "You've made a career of grand gestures. But you're right. This isn't your choice to make. Go. Do whatever Constantine does in moments like this." The Hellblazer vanished into shadow, leaving only cigarette smoke behind. Lucifer walked to the center of the club and looked up through the ceiling, through the floors above, directly at Superman hovering in judgment. Their eyes met across layers of reality, God versus devil, control versus choice. And Lucifer smiled. Superman's heat vision lanced down like divine wrath made manifest, and the assault on Lux, on desire, on freedom, on the very concept of choice, began. The heat vision carved through Lux's roof like God's own scalpel, precise and merciless. But where Superman expected to find chaos, fleeing civilians, the devil desperately shielding innocence, he found only Lucifer standing calmly in the center of the club, a glass of scotch in hand, as the building began to collapse around him. The beam struck Lucifer directly. For 3 full seconds, Superman poured enough thermal energy to vaporize adamantium into the devil's chest. The floor beneath Lucifer's feet melted. The air superheated until it should have ignited. Reality itself seemed to warp under the assault. Lucifer took a sip of his drink. "Is that all?" he called up conversationally. "Because I've been hit harder by my brother Amenadiel during family dinners." Superman descended through the hole he'd created, landing with enough force to crater the floor. Around him, regime enforcers poured in. Wonder Woman through the front entrance, her sword already drawn. Cyborg materializing from a boom tube. Weapon systems online. Damian Wayne dressed in his regime Nightwing armor, Eskrima sticks crackling with lethal voltage. Raven, her darkness coiling like living shadow. The citizens who'd chosen to stay pressed against the walls, terrified but defiant. They'd made their choice. Now they'd see what it cost. "Where are the others?" Superman demanded, scanning the club with X-ray vision. The reports showed hundreds of people entering this establishment. "I let them leave," Lucifer said simply. "Gave them a choice, flee or stand. Unlike you, Clark, I actually respect people's right to self-determination. Those who remained did so freely, knowing exactly what your protection would look like." Superman's jaw tightened. "You turned them into human shields." "No," Lucifer corrected, his voice sharp as broken glass. "You're using them as an excuse for what you're about to do. There's a difference. I offered them choice. You're about to take it away permanently." Wonder Woman moved to flank Superman, Warrior's instinct recognizing that Lucifer was baiting them. "We don't want civilian casualties. Tell them to leave, and this can end peacefully." "They've already made their choice, Diana," Lucifer said, turning his attention to the Amazon. "You know, choice? That thing you used to value when you were actually a hero instead of a tyrant's enabler? Or have you spent so long justifying Superman's methods that you've forgotten what your own principles look like?" Diana's eyes flashed dangerously. "I fight for peace. You fight for Superman," Lucifer interrupted. "There's a difference. You've convinced yourself that his vision of forced order is justice, that eliminating free will is protection. But tell me, Princess, when you swore on the lasso of truth to uphold justice, did you imagine that would mean helping a broken man eliminate humanity's right to choose their own destiny?" "Enough talk," Superman said, moving forward with terrible purpose. "Lucifer Morningstar, you are in violation of regime law. Submit to custody or be removed by force." "Removed where exactly?" Lucifer asked, genuinely curious. "I can't be imprisoned. I've escaped hell itself. I can't be killed. I predate death. I can't be banished. I exist outside dimensional boundaries. So tell me, Clark, what exactly is your plan here? Beat me until I agree to leave? Very heroic." Superman's fist blurred forward faster than human perception, carrying enough kinetic force to shatter mountains. It connected with Lucifer's face with a sound like thunder. Lucifer's head didn't even turn. The devil mused. "Felt that one. Barely. You're holding back, aren't you? Worried about the structural integrity of the building with civilians inside? How considerate. How perfectly Superman. Violence calibrated to appear merciful. Superman hit him again, and again. Each blow powerful enough to level city blocks, to crack continental plates, to dim the sun with displaced atmosphere. He poured decades of frustration into those punches. Frustration with villains who wouldn't stay down, with heroes who questioned his methods, with a universe that refused to conform to his vision of how things should be. Lucifer stood there and took it, expression shifting from amused to bored to almost pitying. "Are you done?" he asked when Superman finally paused, breathing heavily from exertion. "Because I can stand here all night while you work through your issues. Though I'd recommend therapy. Worked wonders for me." "What are you?" Superman demanded, and for the first time in years there was uncertainty in his voice. "I'm Lucifer Morningstar," the devil said patiently, as though explaining to a child. "The Lightbringer, first of the fallen. I was there when your universe was spoken into existence, Clark. I witnessed the birth of your precious Earth. I've fought battles that would break your mind to comprehend. And you, a godling from a dead planet who thinks solar radiation makes him special, you dare to threaten me with violence?" He stepped forward, and Superman actually retreated a pace. Around them, regime enforcers readied weapons, prepared for escalation. "But violence isn't the point of this exercise," Lucifer continued, his tone shifting to something almost gentle. "I'm not here to fight you, Clark. I'm here to hold up a mirror and make you look at what you've become. So let me ask you something. Do you even hear yourself anymore? Submit or be removed. Obey or face consequences. Does any of that sound like the hero who once stood for hope, for truth, for the American way, which, last I checked, included freedom as a founding principle? I stand for protecting people," Superman started. "From themselves." Lucifer's voice cracked like a whip. "That's the critical part you keep omitting. You're not protecting Earth from external threats anymore. You're protecting it from its own choices, its own mistakes, its own humanity. You've decided that people are too dangerous to trust with freedom, so you've become their warden, their jailer, their God-King who knows what's best." Wonder Woman moved to intercede, but Lucifer's gaze stopped her cold. "And you, Diana, daughter of Hippolyta, trained by Amazons who valued truth above all else. How many lies have you told yourself to justify this? How many times have you twisted the definition of justice to accommodate Superman's brutality?" "The regime prevents suffering," Diana began. "The regime prevents living," Lucifer countered. "There's a difference. Suffering is part of existence, Diana. Joy and pain, triumph and failure, hope and despair. These are the colors of life. Superman has created a monochrome world and convinced you it's a masterpiece. Cyborg's weapon systems locked onto Lucifer, energy building. We don't have to justify ourselves to you." "No," Lucifer agreed. "You don't. But perhaps you should justify yourselves to them." He gestured to the citizens still pressed against the walls, watching their protectors become their oppressors in real time. "Look at their faces. Do you see gratitude, relief, hope? Or do you see fear? The same fear that slaves feel watching their masters argue about what's best for them." One of the citizens, emboldened by Lucifer's words, or simply having nothing left to lose, spoke up. "He's right. We came here to remember what it felt like to choose, and you're here to punish us for it. How is that protection?" Damian moved toward the speaker with lethal grace. "Silence! You're in violation." "Damian!" Batman's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He emerged from shadows that shouldn't exist in Lux's bright interior, a ghost haunting his own son's conscience. "Stand down." The younger Wayne froze, years of training warring with years of regime indoctrination. "Father, you shouldn't be here." "Neither should you," Batman said quietly. "Not like this. Not as an enforcer of tyranny." Superman's eyes blazed red. "Bruce, you're making a mistake." "Am I?" Batman moved into the light, revealing how much the war had aged him. "Or are you? Look around, Clark. Really look. You're about to attack civilians in a nightclub because they dared to desire freely. Does any part of you recognize how far you've fallen? They're being manipulated by the devil. They're being offered choice, Batman interrupted. Something you've forgotten exists. Lucifer isn't controlling them. He's not forcing them to rebel. He's just giving them space to remember what wanting something feels like. And that terrifies you because your entire regime is built on the premise that people can't be trusted with choice. The standoff balanced on a razor's edge. Superman and his enforcers on one side. Batman, alone and outnumbered, on the other. Lucifer in the middle, watching with the detached fascination of someone observing a tragedy he'd predicted from the beginning. And around them, citizens who'd simply wanted to feel human again. "This ends now," Superman said, heat vision beginning to kindle. "Lucifer will leave Earth, or I'll make him leave." "You can try," Lucifer said softly, "but let me explain what happens when you do. Every blow you strike at me will pass harmlessly through my form. Every power you wield will accomplish nothing. And all of this display of godlike force used to crush human desire, will be witnessed by everyone here. They'll see the Man of Steel, Earth's greatest hero, reduced to impotent fury because someone dared offer people freedom." He smiled, and it was terrible. "That's the real reason you're here, isn't it? Not because I'm a threat, because I'm showing your subjects what you really are, a control addict who can't tolerate anyone existing outside your authority. The Joker broke you, Clark, but instead of healing, you've spent years breaking everyone else to match." Superman screamed, a sound of pure rage that shattered windows blocks away and unleashed everything. Heat vision, freeze breath, super speed strikes, the full arsenal of Kryptonian fury channeled through years of repressed grief and guilt and desperate need for control. The assault lasted 30 seconds that felt like hours. When the dust settled, Lucifer stood exactly where he'd been, untouched, still holding his scotch. The glass hadn't even rippled. "Feel better?" the devil asked into the ringing silence. And Superman, the Man of Steel, Earth's greatest hero turned tyrant, did something he hadn't done in years. He broke. Superman didn't weep. Gods don't weep, at least not the kind of god he'd convinced himself he needed to be. But something in his posture collapsed, some fundamental certainty that had held him upright through years of absolute conviction. He stood in the ruins of Lux, surrounded by his enforcers and enemies and witnesses, and for the first time since Metropolis's destruction, since Lois's death, since the moment he'd driven his fist through the Joker's chest, doubt cracked through his armor. "I saved them," Superman said, voice hollow. "I ended war, crime, suffering. I gave Earth peace." "You gave Earth a cage," Lucifer replied, but his tone had shifted from mocking to something almost gentle. "And convinced yourself the bars were meant to protect rather than imprison. Do you want to know the saddest part, Clark? You actually believe you're still the hero. That makes you more dangerous than any villain I've encountered in millennia." Batman moved closer, cautious, like approaching a wounded animal. "Clark, look at me." Superman's eyes met his oldest friend's, and for a heartbeat, Bruce saw the farm boy from Kansas who'd once believed in truth and justice. Then the moment passed, and the tyrant returned. "Don't," Superman warned. "Don't try to save me, Bruce. We're past that." "Are we?" Batman gestured around Lux at the civilians watching their exchange with hungry desperation. "These people came here seeking something you've stolen from them. Not safety, not protection, choice. The freedom to want things, to desire things, to make mistakes and learn from them. And your response is violence. How is that different from every villain we've ever fought?" "I'm preventing future suffering. You're preventing life." Batman's voice cracked with years of suppressed emotion. "You're so terrified of loss that you've eliminated the possibility of gain. So afraid of pain that you've murdered joy. You've created a world where nothing bad happens because nothing real can happen at all." Wonder Woman stepped forward, hand still on her sword. "Bruce, you don't understand what we've accomplished?" "I understand perfectly," Batman said, turning his attention to her. "I understand that you've convinced yourself that supporting his tyranny is warrior's loyalty, that enabling his worst impulses is love. But Diana, the woman who trained you, your mother, the Amazons who raised you to value truth, would they recognize what you've become?" Diana's hand tightened on her sword's grip, knuckles white. "How dare you?" "I dare because someone has to. Batman said. Everyone else is either too afraid or too broken or too complicit. But I remember who you were, Diana. Who you all were. Heroes who trusted humanity to rise to challenges, who believed in people's capacity for growth and redemption. When did you forget that? Damian moved between Batman and Wonder Woman, Eskrima sticks raised. You don't get to lecture us about heroism, Father. You hide in shadows, terrorizing criminals, refusing to do what's necessary. I raised you better than this, Batman said quietly, and the pain in his voice stopped Damian cold. I taught you that killing was a line we never crossed. That there were some choices that, once made, couldn't be undone. And you crossed it anyway. You chose Superman over everything I tried to teach you. I chose peace over chaos, Damian said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. Order over anarchy. You chose comfort over conscience, Batman corrected. It's easier to follow Superman's certainty than to live with doubt. Easier to enforce his rules than to trust people to find their own way. I understand the temptation, Damian. I've felt it myself. But understanding doesn't make it right. Lucifer watched the confrontation unfold with the fascination of someone witnessing a family destroy itself over fundamental disagreements about morality. He'd seen this pattern before, in heaven when angels chose sides before the first war, in hell when demons carved out their kingdoms from suffering, in countless civilizations across infinite realities. The same story, played with different characters, always ending in blood and regret. This is fascinating, Lucifer said, interrupting the moment. Truly, the Bat family dysfunction on full display. But we're losing focus on the larger question, what happens now? Superman looked at him, and Lucifer saw something he hadn't expected, genuine uncertainty. What do you want from me? Want? Lucifer laughed. I don't want anything from you, Clark. I'm not here to reform you or redeem you, or teach you some valuable lesson about the error of your ways. I'm here because your regime offends me on a cosmic level, and I felt like doing something about it. He gestured around Lux's destroyed interior. You've proven my point beautifully. These people chose to come here, chose to remember what desire feels like, and your response was overwhelming force. You didn't ask them to leave peacefully, didn't try to understand why they'd risk your wrath. Just violence, immediate and absolute, because they dared exist outside your control. They were being manipulated, Superman started. They were being offered choice, Lucifer corrected, for what felt like the 100th time. And you can't tell the difference anymore. To you, any desire that doesn't align with your vision of perfect order is manipulation, chaos, threat. You've become so isolated in your certainty that you can't conceive of people genuinely wanting something you haven't approved. Cyborg systems chimed with incoming data. Superman, we have a problem. The assault on Lux is being broadcast across Metropolis. Every device, every screen, someone's overriding our communication blackout. Not someone, Lucifer said cheerfully. Me. Well, technically my technology, but I designed it, so credit where it's due. Every citizen in Metropolis is watching this conversation in real time, watching their protector reduced to impotent rage, watching the regime's enforcers threaten civilians for the crime of wanting to feel human. Superman's face went pale. You're turning them against me. No, Lucifer said. I'm showing them who you really are. What you do with that information is their choice. Maybe they'll support you anyway. Maybe fear of chaos will override desire for freedom. Maybe they'll decide your cage is preferable to the wilderness of self-determination. But at least they'll be choosing based on truth rather than propaganda. He turned to address the cameras he'd hidden throughout Lux, speaking directly to every citizen watching. People of Metropolis, of Earth, you've lived under the regime for years now. No crime, no war, no suffering that Superman can prevent. And in exchange, you surrendered the right to choose your own path, to make your own mistakes, to desire things that might be dangerous or foolish or simply inconvenient to his vision of order. His voice carried the weight of cosmic authority, impossible to ignore or dismiss. I am Lucifer Morningstar, the devil, and I'm here to ask you a question that Superman doesn't want you to consider. Is safety worth the price of your soul? Is a life without choice actually a life at all? Or is it just slow-motion death with better healthcare? Around Lux, in the streets of Metropolis, millions of citizens watched on their devices, in homes where conversation had been reduced to approved topics, in workplaces where ambition had been classified as pre-criminal, in schools where children learned obedience rather than critical thinking. They watched and they listened, and they began, for the first time in years, to wonder. Superman saw it happening in real time through his enhanced senses, heard heartbeats quickening across the city, saw pupils dilating with thoughts that shouldn't exist in his perfect order, felt the tremor of collective doubt spreading through his carefully constructed paradise. "You're destroying everything I've built," Superman said, and it was almost a plea. "No," Lucifer said gently. "I'm revealing what you built. The destruction is your own design, a system so fragile that honest questions threaten to topple it entirely. If your regime can't withstand people simply being offered choice, then it was never sustainable to begin with." Wonder Woman drew her sword fully now, divine metal singing with celestial purpose. "Enough. You will cease this broadcast immediately, or we will take you by force." "Try," Lucifer invited. "But understand what that means. Every citizen watching will see their protectors attack someone who's offered them nothing but the freedom to choose. They'll see gods with absolute power threatening to murder anyone who questions their authority. Is that really the message you want to send?" The tension ratcheted higher. Regime enforcers prepared for combat. Batman calculated odds and trajectories, looking for ways to minimize casualties. The civilians pressed against Lux's walls held their breath, witnesses to a confrontation that would define their world's future. And then, from outside, a new voice cut through the standoff. "Stand down, all of you." Constantine stepped through Lux's destroyed entrance, cigarette dangling from his lips, trench coat somehow still pristine despite the chaos. Behind him, a figure materialized from golden light. Dr. Fate, the Lord of Order himself, ancient helmet gleaming with mystic significance. "Oh good," Lucifer said brightly. "The magical cavalry has arrived. This should be entertaining." Fate's voice resonated with the weight of cosmic order. "Lucifer, Morningstar, your presence in this timeline violates the balance between order and chaos. You will cease your interference, or I will be forced to remove you. Will you now?" Lucifer's amusement faded into something colder. "Nabu, you sanctimonious artifact. You lecture me about balance while Superman has tilted Earth so far toward order that chaos itself is dying. Where was your intervention when he started executing criminals? When he eliminated free will in service of perfect control? Or do the Lords of Order only care about balance when it threatens their preferred outcome?" The helmet's eyes blazed. "The regime maintains order. You bring chaos." "I bring choice," Lucifer corrected. "There's a difference, though I understand why beings like you struggle with the concept. Order and chaos, both of you, treating reality like a game board and mortals like pieces to be moved. You're as bad as Superman, just with better cosmic credentials." Constantine took a long drag on his cigarette. "For what it's worth, Morningstar, I think you're right about the regime. But Fate's not wrong either. You've stirred up something that's going to get a lot of people killed." "People die regardless," Lucifer said. "The question is whether they die as slaves or as free beings who made their own choices." "Poetic," Constantine said. "But those civilians behind you? They're about to be caught in a three-way fight between Superman, the Lords of Order, and the bloody devil himself. Is their freedom worth their lives?" Lucifer turned to look at the citizens who'd chosen to stay. Men and women who'd risked everything for one night of genuine feeling. His expression softened with something almost like respect. "I don't know," he admitted, "but fortunately, it's not my choice to make. It's theirs." He addressed the civilians directly. "I'm opening another door. Anyone who wants to leave, do so now. No judgment. This is about to become very dangerous, and I won't stop these zealots from their violence. Stay or go, but choose freely." Not one person moved toward the exit. A woman in her 30s spoke, voice steady despite obvious fear. "We've been prisoners long enough. If we die tonight, at least it'll be because we chose to stand for something real." Lucifer smiled, genuine and warm. "Then I suppose we're all in this together." How wonderfully human of you." He turned back to Superman, Fate, and the assembled powers, spreading his arms wide. "Well then, the mortals have chosen defiance. What will you gods choose?" The moment balanced on a knife's edge. Superman and his regime, Dr. Fate and the weight of cosmic order, Batman representing the insurgency's exhausted hope, Constantine smoking and calculating angles, and Lucifer at the center of it all, like the eye of a storm that was choosing whether to destroy everything or simply dissipate into uncomfortable truth. Then reality itself flexed, and a new presence entered Lux. She appeared without fanfare or dramatic effect, simply stepping through space as though walking from one room to another. Tall, slender, with skin like midnight and eyes that held entire galaxies. Death of the endless, eldest of the endless, the one certainty in all existence. "Oh, bloody hell," Constantine muttered, cigarette nearly falling from his lips. "Not her. Anyone but her." Death smiled, kind and terrible, and absolutely inevitable. "Hello, John. Still smoking those things, I see. They won't kill you, but that doesn't mean they're good for you." She turned her attention to the assembled powers, and even Superman felt a chill of primal recognition. This was Death, not a personification or metaphor. Death herself, who'd been there at the universe's birth and would close the door when it ended. "Lucifer," Death said, her tone carrying the exasperation of an older sister dealing with a troublesome sibling. "What are you doing?" "Having a philosophical debate about free will versus imposed order," Lucifer said, suddenly sounding defensive in a way he hadn't when facing Superman's fury. "It's perfectly reasonable. You're antagonizing a fascist regime, provoking the Lords of Order, and using civilians as props in your eternal rebellion against authority," Death corrected. "That's not a debate. That's you being you." "Is that a criticism?" Lucifer asked. "It's an observation," Death said. She looked around Lux at the destroyed interior, the terrified civilians, the assembled powers ready for violence. "Though I have to say, brother, this is dramatic even for you." Superman found his voice, though it took effort to speak in Death's presence. "Who are you?" "I'm Death," she said simply. "I've met every living thing that's ever died. I'll meet every living thing that ever will die, including you, Clark, though that's still a long way off." She moved through the space with casual grace, acknowledging each presence. Nabu, still trying to impose order on a chaotic universe. Batman, carrying the weight of worlds on your shoulders. Diana, justifying compromise with principles. Constantine, manipulating everyone while pretending you're not. And the civilians. She paused before them with genuine warmth. "You chose to stand for something. I respect that." "Why are you here?" Dr. Fate demanded, and there was actual nervousness in the Lord of Order's voice. "Because someone needs to provide perspective before this gets truly out of hand," Death said. She turned to Superman, and her gaze was neither judging nor forgiving, just infinitely understanding. "Clark, do you know why Lucifer chose to interfere in your regime?" "Because he's the devil," Superman said. "Because causing chaos is his nature." "No," Death corrected gently. "Because you've created something that offends the fundamental nature of existence. My brother isn't chaos incarnate, despite what propaganda suggests. He's free will incarnate. The first being to ever choose something other than what was expected, demanded, or ordained. And you've built a world where choice itself is criminalized." She gestured around Lux. "These people came here to remember what wanting feels like. Not to rebel, not to destroy, just to feel human again. And your response was violence. Does any part of you understand how far you've fallen from the hero who once represented hope?" Superman's jaw tightened. "I represent peace." "You represent control," Death interrupted, and her voice carried the weight of absolute truth. "Peace and control are not the same thing, Clark. Peace requires trust. Control requires fear. You've chosen fear." "After what the Joker did," Superman started. "The Joker killed the woman you loved," Death said, not unkindly. "I was there when Lois died. I held her hand as she passed. She was brave and brilliant and absolutely terrified. And in her final moments, do you know what she said? Superman's face went ashen. Don't. She said, don't let this break him. Death continued, relentless in her compassion. She was dying, pregnant with your child, and her last thought was hoping you'd find a way to heal rather than shatter. But you didn't listen. You let grief turn to rage, rage turned to judgment, and judgment turned to tyranny. You became everything she feared you might become. The silence that followed was profound. Even Lucifer seemed taken aback by Death's brutal honesty. Superman's voice when he spoke was barely a whisper. I saved the world. You ended it, Death said. The world Lois loved, messy, chaotic, full of choice and consequence. You destroyed that more thoroughly than the Joker ever could. You created a museum exhibit where humanity is perfectly preserved, but no longer truly alive. She turned to Dr. Fate. And you, Nabu, you lecture about balance while enabling the greatest imbalance in this timeline's history. Superman has tilted Earth so far toward order that chaos can't even breathe. Where is your precious balance in that? The helmet's glow dimmed slightly. The regime prevents growth, Death said. Evolution, change, all the things that make existence meaningful. You know this, but you tolerate it because it serves Order's interests, regardless of the cost to the mortals you claim to protect. She looked at Batman next. And you, Bruce, my brother is right. You've become a mirror of what you fight. Different methods, same certainty, same refusal to truly trust humanity to save itself. Batman's expression was stone, but his voice cracked. What else can I do? Clark won't stop. The regime won't fall. People keep suffering. So you manipulate them into resistance without giving them real choice, Death said. You use them as soldiers in your war, tell yourself it's necessary, and ignore that you're treating them exactly like Superman does, as pieces on a board rather than people with agency. She finally turned to Lucifer, and her expression softened into something almost affectionate. And you, little brother, always the rebel, always fighting imposed will, whether it's father's or Superman's or anyone else's. But tell me honestly, are you doing this for these people or for yourself? Lucifer met her gaze without flinching. Both. I'm doing it because their situation offends me, and yes, that's selfish. But does it matter? The result is the same. They get to choose. It matters, Death said, because you're using them to make a point. You've put them in danger to prove Superman's tyranny, to demonstrate your principles. That's manipulation too, just dressed in different clothing. I offered them choice, Lucifer started. You offered them a stage to die on, Death corrected. A grand gesture to prove you're right. There's truth in what you're doing, but there's also ego. The same ego that got you cast out of heaven in the first place. The devil actually looked chastened. Perhaps, but at least I'm honest about my selfishness. Can Superman say the same about his altruism? Death sighed, the sound carrying the weight of eternity's exhaustion. None of you are as right as you think you are. Superman's tyranny is real, but Lucifer's methods endanger the very people he claims to help. Batman's resistance is necessary, but his tactics replicate the control he opposes. Dr. Fate maintains balance, but only the balance that serves Order's interests. You're all so certain, so convinced of your righteousness, that you can't see how similar you've become. She addressed the civilians directly. You've chosen to stand here, to risk death for the principle of choice. That takes courage, but understand what you're really caught in. Not a battle between good and evil, but a conflict between different flavors of control dressed up as righteousness. Superman wants to control your actions. Lucifer wants to control your revelation. Batman wants to control your resistance. None of them trust you to simply be. One of the civilians, an old man who'd remained silent until now, spoke. Then what should we do? I don't know, Death admitted, and the honesty was shocking. I'm Death. I understand endings, not choices. But I know that freedom without wisdom leads to chaos, and safety without choice leads to death. You need balance, not the cosmic balance Fate speaks of, but human balance, the kind that acknowledges both danger and dignity. She turned back to the assembled powers. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to freeze this moment, just for a little while, and each of you is going to make a genuine choice. Not what you think you should choose, not what serves your ideology, but what you actually believe is right. Reality rippled, time slowing to crawl. The civilians froze mid-breath. The dust from Lux's destruction hung motionless in the air. Only the major players remained in motion. Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman, Lucifer, Dr. Fate, Constantine, and Death herself. Superman, Death said, you can continue your regime. Keep Earth safe in its cage. Prevent suffering by eliminating choice. That's one path. Or you can step back, trust humanity to make mistakes and learn from them, risk the pain that freedom brings. Choose. She turned to Batman. You can keep fighting, keep manipulating people into resistance, keep using them as weapons, or you can actually trust them to resist on their own, without your control. Choose. To Lucifer. You can keep provoking, keep using these people as proof of your principles, or you can step back and let them find their own way without your interference. Choose. To Dr. Fate. You can enforce order regardless of cost, or you can acknowledge that balance requires both structure and freedom. Choose. Death stepped back, spreading her arms. I'm not compelling you. I'm not forcing outcomes. I'm just giving you all the same thing Lucifer claims to offer. Genuine choice. What happens next is up to you, and whatever you choose, you'll have to live with. Even you, brother. The frozen moment held, pregnant with possibility. Each figure stood at a crossroads of their own making, forced to confront not what they believed they should do, but what they actually wanted. And in that silence, surrounded by the wreckage of Lux and the frozen witnesses to their conflict, the real choice began. Superman was the first to move. He looked at his hands, hands that had killed the Joker, that had executed criminals, that had held the world in an iron grip for years. Hands that had once pulled cats from trees and helped old women cross streets before he decided that wasn't efficient enough, wasn't safe enough, wasn't controlled enough. I can't, he said, voice raw. If I step back, people will die. Crime will return. War will, maybe, Death said, or maybe they'll surprise you. Maybe humanity will rise to the challenge, build something better than either tyranny or chaos. But you'll never know as long as you're controlling every variable. Lois would have, Superman started, then stopped, because he didn't know. Not really. He'd convinced himself he was honoring her memory, but Death's words had planted doubt. Would Lois have wanted this? A world where her death justified eliminating freedom itself? Wonder Woman watched him struggle, her own certainty cracking. She'd supported Superman because she believed in him, because warriors' loyalty demanded it, because the alternative, admitting she'd helped create a tyranny, was too painful to contemplate. Diana, Superman said quietly, if you could choose freely without duty or loyalty or any obligation to me, what would you do? The question hung between them. Diana's hand fell away from her sword. I would ask you to remember who you were, she said finally. The man who once told me that hope was humanity's greatest strength, that they didn't need gods to save them. They needed inspiration to save themselves. When did we stop believing that? Superman closed his eyes. Images flashed through his mind. Lois's smile, the Joker's laughter. Metropolis in ruins. The first criminal he'd executed. The moment Bruce had looked at him with fear instead of friendship. The slow transformation from hero to tyrant, each step justified, each compromise necessary, until the man he'd been was buried beneath the god he'd become. I don't know how to go back, he admitted. You can't, Death said gently. You can only go forward. The question is what direction that takes. Across from them, Batman faced his own reckoning. Years of manipulation, of using people as assets, of treating the insurgency as soldiers rather than individuals with their own agency. He'd become what he fought, and Lucifer had been right to call him on it. If I step back, Batman said slowly, the regime will continue. People will suffer under Superman's control. Maybe, Death said, or maybe people will resist on their own. Maybe they'll find ways to reclaim freedom without needing the Bat family to orchestrate their rebellion. but you have to let them try. Batman looked at Damian, his son, who'd chosen Superman over everything Bruce had taught him. Looked at the civilians who'd come to Lux seeking choice, not liberation. Looked at years of control dressed up as heroism, and finally saw it clearly. "I've been just as bad as Clark," he said. "Different methods, same arrogance." "Recognition is the first step," Death said. Lucifer watched them both with complex emotions. Pride that his provocation had worked. Frustration that Death was right about his own manipulation. Uncertainty about what came next. A feeling he hadn't experienced in millennia. "Sister dear," he said, "you know I hate admitting when you're right." "I do," Death said with a slight smile, "which makes this even more satisfying." "I put these people in danger to make a point," Lucifer admitted, looking at the frozen civilians. "Use them as props in my eternal rebellion against imposed authority. That makes me no better than Superman, doesn't it?" "It makes you Lucifer," Death said. "But yes, you've manipulated them just as surely as Clark has. The difference is you gave them the choice to be manipulated, which is something. Not enough, but something." Lucifer turned to Superman, and for the first time, his expression was serious rather than mocking. "I owe you an apology, Clark. Not for opposing your regime. That's still tyranny and deserves opposition. But for using these people to prove my point. That was beneath me." Superman stared at him, shocked into silence. "Don't get used to it," Lucifer added quickly. "I rarely apologize. But Death has a way of making one confront uncomfortable truths." Dr. Fate's helmet blazed with internal conflict. "Order must be maintained." "Must it?" Death asked. "Or is that just what you've told yourself for so long that you can't imagine alternatives? Naboo, you've existed for millennia. You've seen civilizations rise and fall, order and chaos ebb and flow. Has enforced order ever actually worked long-term?" The helmet dimmed. In the silence, a voice emerged. Not Naboo's cosmic authority, but Kent Nelson's human uncertainty. "No, it always falls apart eventually. But we keep trying because the alternative is chaos." "The alternative is balance," Death corrected. "Real balance. Not order-crushing chaos or vice versa, but both existing in tension. Humanity needs both structure and freedom, safety and risk, certainty and possibility. That's what you've forgotten." Constantine, who'd been watching everything with his usual cynical detachment, finally spoke. "So what now? We all have our little epiphanies, promise to do better, and everything's sorted. That's not how the world works, love." "No," Death agreed. "Epiphanies are easy. Living with their implications is hard, but it's a start." She looked at each of them in turn. "Superman, you can dismantle the regime gradually, return power to people, trust them to govern themselves. It will be messy. People will make mistakes. Some will die from choices you could have prevented. Can you live with that?" Superman's struggle was written across his face. Every instinct screamed to maintain control, to prevent suffering, to be the guardian Earth needed. But beneath that, buried under years of grief and rage, was the farm boy who'd once believed people deserved to make their own choices. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I'm willing to try." Death nodded. "Batman, you can stop manipulating the resistance. Let people choose their own rebellion or their own acceptance. Trust that if they want freedom, they'll fight for it without you pulling strings. Can you do that?" Batman looked at the frozen civilians, at people who'd risked everything not because he'd orchestrated it, but because they'd chosen it themselves. "It goes against every tactical instinct, but yes, I can try." "Lucifer," Death said, "you can step back. Let humanity find its own balance without you provoking or testing or manipulating. That's harder for you than anything, isn't it? Not interfering?" Lucifer laughed, but it was tinged with genuine self-awareness. "You know me too well, sister. But yes, I can leave them to their own devices, though I reserve the right to reopen Lux if they ask nicely." "Fair enough," Death said. She turned to Dr. Fate. "And you, Naboo, can you accept balance over absolute order?" The helmet was silent for a long moment. Then Kent Nelson's voice emerged fully, pushing past the cosmic entity's control. "I've been fighting Nabu for years, trying to maintain my humanity while wearing this helmet. Maybe it's time I stopped fighting and just let go. Let humans find their own balance without Lords of Order dictating terms." The helmet began to glow. Not with Nabu's golden authority, but with something warmer, more human. Kent was taking control, perhaps for the first time in decades. Death smiled. "Good. Now comes the hard part." She gestured, and time began to flow again. The civilians unfroze, dust resumed its fall, and Lux existed once more in normal continuity. But something had changed. The assembled powers, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Lucifer, Dr. Fate, all wore expressions of people who'd confronted themselves and found themselves wanting. Superman addressed the civilians directly, and his voice carried none of the absolute authority it had held before. "I've made mistakes. The regime was built on my grief and fear, and I convinced myself it was heroism. I can't undo years of control overnight, but I can start trying, if you'll let me." He looked at Batman. "I need help. Not fighting you. Learning to trust again." Batman stepped forward, and the two oldest friends who'd become bitter enemies stood face to face. "I need help too. I've been just as controlling, just as certain. Maybe we can figure this out together." Wonder Woman removed her sword, setting it aside, a gesture of peace that rippled through the regime enforcers. "The warrior's path is knowing when to fight and when to stand down. I've forgotten that. It's time to remember." Lucifer addressed the civilians with uncharacteristic sincerity. "I offered you choice, but I also used you to make a point. You deserved better. If you want Lux to remain open, it'll be because you choose it, not because I'm manipulating you into defiance." One of the civilians, the woman who'd first spoken, stepped forward. "We choose to keep choosing. Whatever that looks like, however hard it is." Death watched with satisfaction. "This isn't the end of your struggles. Superman will be tempted to control. Batman will struggle not to manipulate. Lucifer will find new ways to provoke. But at least now you're aware of your patterns. That's progress." She began to fade, her work done. "Oh, and John, do try to smoke less. It won't kill you, but it's still a terrible habit." Constantine raised his cigarette in sardonic salute as Death disappeared, leaving the assembled powers and civilians to figure out what came next. The broadcast was still running. Every citizen of Metropolis had watched the confrontation, the revelations, the choices. In homes and workplaces across Earth, people began to discuss what they'd witnessed. Not rebellion exactly, not acceptance either, just consideration. The first real choices in years. The regime didn't fall that night. Tyranny never crumbles instantly, but cracks appeared in its foundation, and through those cracks, the light of choice began to seep. The dismantling of the regime took months, not days. Superman didn't simply abandon his control that would have created the chaos he'd spent years preventing. Instead, he began the painful, methodical process of returning power to the people he'd spent so long protecting from themselves. The first regime facility to close was the orbital surveillance network. Superman personally deactivated the satellites that had monitored every heartbeat, every thought, every potential crime before it happened. Standing in the Watchtower's control room, surrounded by screens that had once shown him everything, he watched them go dark one by one. Wonder Woman stood beside him, no longer in regime armor, but in her classic red and blue, a conscious return to who she'd been before grief became policy. "It feels wrong," Superman admitted, "not knowing what's happening everywhere at once, not being able to prevent crimes before they occur." "It feels human," Diana corrected gently. "Vulnerable, uncertain. That's what we forgot. That vulnerability is part of being heroic, not weakness to be eliminated." Batman worked in parallel, systematically dismantling the insurgency's infrastructure. No more manipulation. No more using civilians as unknowing assets in a shadow war. He called a meeting of everyone who'd fought for the resistance and told them the truth. They were free to make their own choices about how to proceed without his orchestration. Harley Quinn had laughed at that. Bat's admitting he's been a control freak? Hell really did freeze over. But she'd also been the first to volunteer for the new model, not soldiers in Batman's war, but citizens choosing their own forms of resistance or reconciliation. Some continued to oppose remnants of regime authority. Others chose to work within the system Superman was gradually rebuilding. Both were valid, both were respected. Lucifer kept Lux open, but with a crucial difference. He stopped using it as a tool of provocation and simply made it a place where people could feel freely. No agenda, no manipulation, just drinks and conversation and the freedom to desire without judgment. Constantine visited occasionally, still cynical but grudgingly impressed. "You're going soft, Morningstar. The devil running an honest establishment. Who'd have thought?" "I prefer to think of it as character growth," Lucifer said, pouring whiskey with practiced ease. "Though between you and me, John, sometimes I miss the chaos. Being responsible is terribly boring." "Welcome to the human experience," Constantine said, raising his glass. The civilians who'd stood in Lux that night became something unexpected. Not martyrs or heroes, but simply people who'd made a choice and lived with it. They returned to their lives, but something had changed. They remembered what wanting felt like, what choosing meant, and they shared that remembering with others, quietly, persistently, until it spread like wildfire through a population that had forgotten how to burn. Dr. Fate, or rather Kent Nelson wearing the helmet on his own terms, worked with the magical community to establish true balance. Not order-crushing chaos, but both existing in productive tension. Zatanna, Constantine, and other magic users formed a council that operated on consensus rather than cosmic mandate. "Nabu hates this," Ken admitted during one meeting. "The helmet practically vibrates with disapproval every time we vote instead of decree." "Tell the old artifact to cope," Constantine said. "Democracy is messy, but it beats tyranny, even cosmic tyranny." The hardest change was in Superman himself. Years of absolute certainty had calcified into identity, and learning to live with doubt felt like dying slowly. He caught himself reaching for control constantly, wanting to stop crimes before they happened, to prevent suffering through intervention, to be the guardian Earth needed rather than the inspiration it deserved. Batman helped, ironically enough. The two met weekly, not as enemies, but as friends trying to remember who they'd been before trauma reshaped them into weapons. "I still want to save everyone," Superman admitted during one session, sitting on the Fortress of Solitude's steps, staring at stars that no longer felt like subjects requiring protection. "So do I," Batman said. "The difference is accepting that we can't, that trying to save everyone by controlling everything just creates a different kind of death." "How do you live with it? Knowing people will suffer because you didn't intervene?" "Badly," Batman said honestly. "I don't sleep. I second-guess every decision. I wonder if the people who died because I didn't manipulate circumstances would still be alive if I just pulled the strings. But then I remember, those people deserve to make their own choices, even if those choices led to pain." Superman looked at his oldest friend, seeing the toll that Epiphany had taken. "We've both been fighting so long, we forgot what we were fighting for." "Then maybe it's time we remember," Batman said. Damian's journey back from the regime was perhaps the most painful. He'd been raised in darkness, first by the League of Assassins, then by Batman, then by Superman's certainty. Learning to trust in humanity's goodness rather than impose order through violence required unmaking everything he'd become. Dick Grayson helped, returning from exile to guide his brother through the process. "You killed people because Superman convinced you it was necessary. Now you have to live with that. But living with it doesn't mean being defined by it." "How do I make amends for murder?" Damian asked him, the question raw with genuine remorse. "You don't," Dick said. "You can't, but you can choose differently going forward. That's all redemption ever is, not erasing the past, but refusing to let it dictate the future." Slowly, painfully, the injustice timeline began to heal. Not completely. Some wounds were too deep, some deaths too permanent, some betrayals too fundamental, but healing nonetheless, one choice at a time. Lex Luthor, surprisingly, became one of the strongest advocates for the transition. Having fought both Superman's tyranny and his own tendency toward megalomania, He understood better than most how power corrupted. The problem with absolute power, Lex announced during a broadcast, isn't that it corrupts absolutely. That's obvious. The problem is that it convinces you your corruption is righteousness. Superman thought he was saving Earth. He was actually destroying it. I've made the same mistake. We all have. The question is whether we learn from it. He established initiatives to help citizens reclaim agency, education programs about critical thinking, support groups for those traumatized by the regime, economic systems designed to distribute power rather than concentrate it. Not perfect systems, just better ones. Never thought I'd see the day Luthor became a humanitarian, Batman observed. He's still a narcissist, Superman said, but at least he's channeling it constructively. Aren't we all? Batman replied. 6 months after the confrontation at Lux, the United Nations, restored to actual function rather than regime puppet, held a vote on Earth's future governance. Superman abstained, refusing to use his influence. Batman did the same. The vote was close, contentious, marked by passionate debate and genuine disagreement. In the end, humanity chose a hybrid model: structures to prevent the worst excesses of chaos, freedoms to allow growth and self-determination, oversight to catch potential tyranny before it took root, flexibility to adapt as circumstances changed. Not perfect, not safe, not controlled, but chosen. Lucifer watched the broadcast from Lux, surrounded by patrons who'd learned to desire freely again. Constantine sat beside him, smoking despite Death's advice. "Proud of yourself?" Constantine asked. "Should I be?" Lucifer countered. "I manipulated them almost as much as Superman did, just toward different ends." "But you also stepped back when it mattered," Constantine said. "Let them make the final choice themselves." "That's worth something." "Perhaps," Lucifer said. He raised his glass to the broadcast, to the messy, imperfect democracy struggling to be born. "Here's to humanity. May they surprise themselves." In the Watchtower, Superman and Wonder Woman watched the same broadcast. The space station was being converted from surveillance hub to actual meeting place, somewhere heroes could coordinate without controlling. "Do you think we made the right choice?" Diana asked. "I don't know," Superman admitted, "but I think it was the right choice to let them make their own." Batman arrived via teleportation, Alfred's care package of tea and sandwiches in hand. The three founders of what had been the Justice League, then the regime, now simply three people trying to figure out what came next. "The League's reformation vote is tomorrow," Batman said. "Current proposal is purely voluntary membership, no mandated missions, actual democratic decision-making." "Sounds chaotic," Superman said. "Sounds human," Wonder Woman corrected, echoing her words from months ago. "Sounds terrifying," Superman admitted. "And also right." They sat together, not planning or strategizing or controlling, just existing in a moment of genuine uncertainty about the future. It was uncomfortable, vulnerable, absolutely necessary. Outside Lux, the woman who'd first chosen to stay during Superman's assault erected a small memorial. Not to those who died, miraculously, none had in that final confrontation, but to the choice itself. A plaque that read simply, "Here, people remembered they could choose. May we never forget again." Lucifer saw it during his evening walk, and something shifted in his ancient heart. Pride, perhaps, or hope, or simply recognition that even the devil could contribute to something beautiful when he stopped trying to prove points and started trusting people to surprise him. He returned to Lux as night fell over Metropolis, a city no longer perfectly safe, no longer completely controlled, but alive in ways it hadn't been for years. People laughed in streets without checking for surveillance. Artists created without fear of pre-crime algorithms. Citizens debated politics loudly, passionately, without worry that disagreement meant dissent meant detention. The injustice timeline hadn't been fixed. Lois was still dead. The Joker's victims couldn't be resurrected. Years of regime control had left scars that would take generations to heal. But for the first time since Superman had killed the Clown Prince of Crime, since he'd decided that safety required surrendering freedom, since he'd become the tyrant rather than the hero, Earth had hope again. Not the desperate hope of the insurgency, not the false hope of regime propaganda, just honest, vulnerable, terrifying hope that maybe, possibly, humanity could govern itself, could make mistakes and learn from them, could suffer and grow stronger, could choose its own destiny, whatever that looked like. Lucifer poured himself a final drink as Lux filled with evening patrons. The devil who'd rebelled against heaven's tyranny, who'd challenged Superman's regime, who'd offered humanity the most dangerous gift of all, genuine choice. He raised his glass to the sky, to the watchtower being repurposed, to the regime's satellites falling silent, to the messy, beautiful chaos of free will reasserting itself. To choice, Lucifer said quietly, may it always be worth the price. And somewhere in the infinite dark between universes, death smiled. The Injustice timeline's reformation was fragile, imperfect, and absolutely necessary. Superman learned to live with uncertainty rather than eliminate it. Batman learned to trust rather than control. Wonder Woman remembered that warriors choose when to fight and when to stand down. And humanity, broken, scarred, traumatized by years of tyranny, learned to choose again. Lucifer, Morningstar, had returned to a fallen world and offered it the most dangerous gift, the freedom to want, to desire, to choose freely even when those choices led to pain. He hadn't saved them, hadn't solved their problems, hadn't imposed his own version of right and wrong. He'd simply reminded them what they'd forgotten, that a life without choice wasn't a life at all, just slow-motion death with better management. The devil had proven more heroic than the hero, and in doing so, had given Earth's greatest champions the mirror they needed to see what they'd become. Not saviors, not protectors, just people with power who'd forgotten that power meant nothing without the wisdom to surrender it. The regime fell not through violence, but through choice. Superman's choice to step back, Batman's choice to trust, humanity's choice to risk freedom over guaranteed safety. And in those choices, terrifying, uncertain, absolutely essential, hope returned to a universe that had almost forgotten what it felt like. Lucifer remained at Lux, serving drinks and granting desires, no longer provoking, but simply present. A reminder that even in darkness, even after tyranny, even when hope seems lost, choice endures, free will persists, and sometimes, just sometimes, the devil himself can teach gods what it means to be truly heroic. The Injustice timeline would never be the paradise Superman had tried to force it to become, but perhaps in its messy, imperfect, chosen reality, it would become something better, a world where humanity governed itself, learned from its mistakes, and chose its own destiny, one desire at a time, one choice at a time, one act of free will at a time.